There are skinheads that hang out organizing this event.
Really? Where? I mean, he's got no hair, but I don't know.
Like,
Does he have like the?
that's his skills. I mean,
How do you know he's a skinhead just because he's bald?
in skinhead style, he's at a right-wing event.
The real pressure is to be honest early enough. I mean, just basically to have your full intellectual and ethical commitment to be not to pretend to know something you don't know. So that is just the magic bullet in every situation. If you're pretending to know things you don't know, you are always vulnerable to embarrassment.
I don't know.
Put two and two together.
It could be. It could
so
be.
like, why would you associate yourself with that?
I have alopecia areata. It's a medical condition that I got while I was serving in the military. So I had a backpack on that stops cell phone signals from detonating bombs under our feet, and it either gives you a big white stripe up your head, or if you, do you mind touching me? So feel it right there. Baby smooth, right? That's it right now. So I got patches in my head. So I had to shave my head because how would you rather be like have weird awkward patches in my head?
I'm very scrupulous about not misrepresenting the views of my enemies. And I use the word enemy now really unselfconsciously. It's a strange word to use. But I mean, it's obvious to me now that I have people who are so malicious in their intentions toward me that I can't think of them as anything other than enemies. And but whenever I have made the mistake of saying something that was, however inadvertently, misleading about what their positions are, I've done my best to correct it.
I'm not a white nationalist. No, I'm not a white supremacist. No, I'm not. I don't believe in Hitler. Like, I don't do the goose step. Like, I don't do it.
Yeah.
Literally, the only reason I'm bald is because I have alopecia.
I apologize for assuming.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, I actually had the same conversation earlier. It's a matter of people on our side. It's not even about hating others like his side. It's like we're just rich white people who don't have any kindness. We're genuinely standing against people who are playing identity politics. Like, just because someone is a color, you see them as evil, and we're not.
I feel like we're at a very odd place in discourse in America where truth is completely subjective now, and people don't care no matter how many times you expose these people.
Yeah, well, there is, I think that's what's happened. There's a tribalism to all of these arguments. And the side you're on, for the most part, is not, doesn't feel at all ethically obligated to honestly interact with the opposing side. And so it's just everything is a smear campaign. You're just trying, rather than, I mean, it's one thing to spread accurate information about the other side, which is, in your view, destabilizing of their position. I mean, if you're criticizing them with accurate information, but so much of what we see is just an ends justify the means rationale.
Should celebrities just keep their nose out of politics and just entertain us? Peter, I'll come to you first.
Yes, they absolutely should. I think when it comes to politics, celebrities should show restraint. Audiences want to be entertained, they want light relief, they don't want to be hectored and have to witness virtue signaling and political posturing. That's not what people want, and it's not the jobs of celebrities to do that. They should just stick to the day job.
Yeah, I went to the inauguration.
I'm not attacking you.
You get this down. I'm not kidding. You got to be real careful around here. You know, you get beat up. If you don't believe what everybody believes, this is like 30s Germany. I don't know what happened. If you're not part of the group, you know what we believe is right. I go, well, I might have a problem with that.
They know that their acceptance speech will get on the news, on our show and like-minded shows around the world the next day if they make a political statement.
It's just really naff virtue signalling, and ironically, it's not even about the political issues that they're addressing, or the demographics in society who may be affected by certain policies or whatever. It's about them and their ego. They cannot stand just being light entertainers. They want to have this heavyweight veneer of intellectualism, and so they just buy into it.
The reason I've focused on the left is because I've always considered myself part of the left. I don't know, to me at this point, I don't know, that these labels are all starting to change, and I don't think they matter that much anymore. At this point, being liberal to me doesn't strike me as a position of the left anymore. Really being for critical thinking and honest debate and free speech, that's really not what's on the left anymore. And again, that's not a defense of the right. That's what everyone will suddenly say, you see, he's defending the right.
Yeah.
Not defending the right. I'm just saying, I don't know that I can be part of this anymore. Do you feel similarly to that?
Yeah, people talk about classical liberalism now to differentiate the liberalism from what's happening on the left. And yeah, I mean, if you're liberal, you have to be committed to free speech. I mean, free speech has to win just across the board. And what we're seeing on the left is a kind of censoriousness and really kind of an authoritarian moment where they're just trying to stifle the expression of ideas which, however provocative, are not obviously false.
Right.
So the burden is on you to interact with these provocative ideas if you think they're dangerous or just mistaken.
Yeah.
And show them to be dangerous and or mistaken.
The point is the gap is there still, and older women in particular suffer more from it from younger women. We shouldn't just leave older women, to flounder, should we? Just because they were part of a generation where it was even more difficult for them to get on.
I'm making a specific explanation about where these figures come from, and you haven't really addressed the point that I'm making. What I'm saying is that you can only create this gender gap when you take a broad brush across all genders, all sectors, all work. That doesn't reflect the different choices people make, and employers aren't, shouldn't be forced to pay a full-time salary to somebody who works part-time. You haven't come up with a solution to that, and you haven't addressed the problem with the figures, which is that no serious economist treats the gender pay gap as a problem to be solved. No economist thinks this is a problem because they realise what I'm explaining.
Is that male economist or female economist, just to be clear?
I pretty much would say that you can absolutely say and think anything short of the direct call for violence to an individual or a group. I think you have to have someone, but beyond that, you want to put Auschwitz cartoons out there all day long, and you want to put Nazi this and fag that. Congratulations, you guy in your basement sending those memes. You think you're great, and that makes you big. I just think I would put no limitations other than the direct threat. But do you think the direct threat is even?
Well, no, I think there should be no limitations on that kind of speech because. So like the Holocaust denial laws in Europe, I think are absurd and counterproductive.
I'm here to speak to you about a global phenomenon. This phenomenon has affected almost every major capital city in the West. It's certainly affected every Muslim majority country in the world. It affects every one of you, and it definitely has affected Muslims, my own community, because more Muslims have been killed and victimized, murdered, tortured, and persecuted by this phenomenon than any other community or population in the world. I'm here to speak to you about something that we must feel that we have permission to speak openly and freely about. My name is Maajid Nawaz. For 13 years, I was on the leadership of a radical Islamist organization seeking to resurrect the caliphate. I spent 5 of those years in prison in Egypt witnessing torture and was then released 10 years ago this year. I'm here to speak to you about the global jihadist insurgency.
I mean, the most dispiriting thing I've encountered since my collaboration with Maajid, and we as probably most of your viewers know, we wrote this book together. We were initially adversaries in a way, and I reached out to him and decided to just see if we could do a kind of a blog exchange. And it became so fruitful, we did this book together. And Maajid, as you know, is just impeccable and as reasonable and ethical and wise as anyone you're going to find on this topic. I mean, he's just like, you couldn't invent a better spokesman for a rational, secular, reformist Muslim project, right? Like just he's basically perfect. And yet to see the degree to which he has been hated by the so-called moderate Muslim community and disavowed, and his collaboration with me viewed as just a total deal. I mean, this is the amazing thing, is he's actually said at one point in our collaboration, he said, my talking to you, a well-known atheist and critic of Islam, is far more controversial than my talking to a jihadist.
8 years ago, I founded Quilliam, an organization that is led by Muslims, founded by former Islamists, to push back against the ideological propaganda of Islamist extremists. Now let's pause for a moment just to define exactly what I'm talking about. When I say Islamism, I'm speaking of the desire to impose any version of Islam, my own religion, over society. I am not speaking about Islam, the faith, which has its own challenges, which religion doesn't.
He could have done a book with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS.
Yeah.
Like, let's get this straight. There's the Reformist Project, and then there's the True Jihad Project. Let's talk about it, right? That would be an interesting book, but that would be less controversial among so-called moderate Muslims than his talking to a well-known atheist. That's, that is like just an X-ray view of virtually everything that's wrong with the Muslim community at this moment. And the burden is upon Muslims to talk honestly about this.
I'm here to speak about the desire to impose any version of that religion over society, and that's what I call Islamism. The use of force to spread Islamism, I call jihadism. That's what I'm here to speak to you about today, because lots of things have been done wrong in an attempt to tackle this problem. The first is an inability to even recognize what we're dealing with. I call this a global jihadist insurgency for a reason, because both under the era of President Bush and the so-called war on terror, and currently under President Obama, there has been a fundamental misdiagnosis as to exactly what we're dealing with and how to treat it.
Right, it's just that there are vast differences among the religions, and these are differences that the adherents of the religions really care about. Right. If devout Muslims care that their religion teaches something different from Mormonism, right?
That's the whole point.
Yeah,
pretty much.
So like all the details matter, and the crazier you are, the more attached you are to the doctrine, they matter more. And and given that there are these differences among religions, we are actually misled when we just use the word religion over and over again to describe what people are doing and why they're doing it.
So let's go way back. Many of you will remember Bush. Let's go back to President Bush, and to caricature his approach, forgive me for the caricature, but it will demonstrate the point I'm seeking to make. George Bush believed in entering this war on terror that democracy could be imposed at the barrel of a gun, hence the invasion of Iraq, and hence an attempt to democratize an entire nation from top down. We all know how that went. Moving on from Bush, Obama realized those mistakes, recognized the error in an attempt to impose democracy from the top down, recognized that actually, if democracy is a culture, if it is a set of values, it cannot be enforced at the barrel of a gun. So President Obama came along, what did he do? He ditched the democracy piece and turned that gun into a drone and a tank and targeted assassinations and kill lists. In fact, President Obama launched more drone strikes against terrorists that he arbitrarily designated than President Bush ever did. Many of us don't know that. The view was that what we're dealing with is an organized crime gang, and the way to deal with it is the way we dealt with Al Capone. Take out the leader and you deal with the gang. That's the misdiagnosis I'm speaking about. As harmful as what Bush did. We cannot kill our way out of this problem. We cannot shoot our way out of this problem. And we certainly cannot legislate our way out of this problem. As demonstrated by the fact that the same year Obama killed bin Laden by shooting him in the head at point blank range. Our cognitive dissonance led us to say, when Malala was shot in the head, you cannot kill an idea, long live democracy, yet when bin Laden was shot in the head, somehow we've killed jihadism. The truth is that shooting neither in the head was going to destroy the ideas that they stood for. Of course, I'm on the side of Malala now. Thank God. The point here is that you cannot kill an idea. And yes, there is a place for law. Of course there is. Yes, there is a place for war. I'm not a pacifist. But ultimately, in the long term, to help us get through this, we need to recognize something else. And that is that if this is true, that this is a jihadist insurgency, as what happened after the death of bin Laden proved, that the more you kill insurgent leaders, the more they are able to replace themselves, because no insurgency is able to survive without a residual level of support within the communities it seeks to recruit from.
So someone like Maajid, who I agree with everything you've just said, I mean, I have incredible empathy and sympathy and admiration for him. He gets hate from, sort of the mainstream Muslim community because they don't want him talking about this stuff. Then he gets treated horribly by the left when they'll call him a lapdog and all the other horrible things they've said about him. And then his only way to talk about it is he has to either talk to you who have become a lightning rod for, I think, all the wrong reasons, or he has to go on Fox or something. And then they're like, see, he's a right winger. So it all becomes like this crazy mess where actually the left is enabling people, they're pushing people like Maajid right. I'm not saying any of his positions are right, but the only outlets that he can let himself be heard on end up being something like Fox.
I mean, it frankly is terrifying how morally blind the left and the quote moderate Muslim community is to just how much obvious wisdom and risk he's incurring. I mean, he's taking massive risks to try to find daylight, in this morass, and there really is only one path to that daylight, which is to talk honestly about why there's so much mayhem in the Muslim world.
So no surprise that when we killed bin Laden, something even worse of a Hydra's head, the Medusa multi-headed beast emerged, known as ISIS or Daesh. Something that we could never have imagined being worse than Al-Qaeda emerged, because we cannot kill our way out of this problem. And that's what happens when there's a level of support within the communities, because it's the definition of an insurgency, something we should have learned from Vietnam. So what we really need is to diagnose the problem correctly. There is an ideology at play that seeks to recruit people on the grassroots, to radicalize them, and to make them join these organizations. How on earth is it possible, if not for this case, for this to be true, that 6,000 born and raised European citizens go to join the worst terrorist group that history has ever known, if not for the fact that there was a level of support within the communities, because this ideology has been propagated for decades within our own Muslim communities in Europe. I know because I used to propagate it.